We have quite a bit on the agenda today, so I'm going to try to move things along. Number one, minutes from the previous meeting. I assume we agree with the minutes of the previous meeting. Number two, business arising from previous meetings. Monsieur Perron.
Oui, bonjour tout le monde.
Hi, everyone. I'll try to go quickly. I have a lot of information to relay about interpretation. I had promised that I would keep you apprised of the file and how it was developing. I met with the minister as we had agreed. It was a good meeting. I also had the privilege of meeting Mr. Limburner. We had a cordial discussion. We established the need for transparency, collaboration. So I think that will help for the future. And I also had contact with people from AIC and CAPE. Now, if you looked at the answers that we received, I imagine that my colleagues paid close attention to the answers. There's an idea of creating a follow-up committee where we could do a regular follow-up on the interpretation issue, and there would be elected officials from each party present. It would be open to everyone. I think it's an interesting idea. Of course, I still have my deeper questions. Why does the Translation Bureau have to function as a cost recovery organization? There is very much concern, a very huge concern about AI. Now, no one is against AI, but it has to be a tool. It shouldn't replace actual humans. So there's a lot of stuff to work on. We also have to preserve excellence and the equivalency between both official languages. And I raised the question. I will be following up with Mr. Limburner, but I think that on the committee there should be not only representatives from the political parties, but also interpreters who represent AIC and CAPE, so that we can really call it a true committee. Based on my years of experience, I know that sometimes people strike a committee to set aside an issue, but I'm not trying to suggest that there's no will for collaborating with us, but it's important that we don't create a committee just to waste time. That's not the impression I got. I think it's a constructive proposal, so I'm very enthusiastic about it. I hope it goes forward. So I had promised that I would keep you apprised. So that's what I did. That was the good news. Now for the bad news. I have some bad news for you. You may remember that I mentioned the incident at the Nuclear Safety Commission where there was interpretation, but nothing was intelligible. There was the very day that happened, the Translation Bureau recruited accredited interpreters for the following day at the Nuclear Safety Commission, but there was still a bit of a difficulty. We talked about it with the minister and with Mr. Limburner, and there was a commitment that it wouldn't happen anymore. However, I can send this to you, Chair. There are excerpts from hearings on May 27th and 28th where there's interpretation by non-accredited interpretation, and it's unintelligible. It's not acceptable. If you listen to the English version, that is a little quieter in the background, if you understand both official languages, and that is a privilege, you realize that the unilingual francophone listener misses out on half of the information. That's unacceptable. We're talking about the Nuclear Safety Commission here. Think of someone who may have built themselves a home, who's paid attention to the materials used. At the end of the day, they find themselves close to a nuclear plant. It's very concerning, and at the end of the day, they don't understand half of what's being said at the hearings. I think it's actually a risk. Another thing, and it's my duty to inform you of this, I had talked about events at the School of Public Service. I don't have any new news about that, but I also heard that the CRTC is not satisfied by the interpretation services that were offered there. The CRTC asked for changes to be made. Now, I won't go into detail. It's confidential, but it's important to note that this problem is reoccurring. After the incident at the Nuclear Safety Commission, there was a formal promise that this wouldn't happen again, but it did. And so we can't always function this way. It can't always be up to Yves Perron, the bloc whip, to make a complaint. There was a promise that a mechanism would be put into place to avoid this kind of issue, and it didn't happen. So I think that striking a long-term collaborative committee is very important and must include people who work on the ground, interpreters. Otherwise, they would have no value. That's my opinion anyway. Now, I want to come back to the questions that we had asked and the answers that we got. So, you remember that we talked about the exam, the accreditation. There used to be 4 accredited interpreters who graded the exam, and then there was an external examiner. What we were told is that there was a 50-50 weighting of the votes, and if there was a difference of opinion, the administration would decide. What we found out, and you have the letter before you, before interpreters were given 33% of the weighting. I am not looking at the right document, just a moment. Here it is. So 33% of the weighting, the 4 senior interpreters chose to provide a common grade that counted for 33% of the grade. Mr. Jolicoeur and Mr. Ball also were given 33% of the weighting. So that was a total of 100%. In the borderline cases, when the overall evaluation was positive, but there were some specific reservations that did not allow a definitive conclusion to be reached, Mr. Ball conducted a reevaluation, and that decision was determinative. So if you look at it from another angle, 33% for the interpreters, 33% for the external auditor, and then the administrator decides in the end, then that's really a 50-50 split as we had understood at the beginning. So this misunderstanding, misapprehension of the information would not have occurred if there had been transparency from the outset. So I thank the Translation Bureau for this transparency now. Now, are things better than before? I don't know, but at least we have the facts. And then there's information about the rates of the passage rates of the exam, the success rates. The only thing that we don't know is why the spring exam, the people who wanted to sit the TR3 exam, the accreditation exam, was canceled. That's a very important issue. People work very hard to prepare for the exam. When I talked about this with Mr. Limburner, he said, well, it's not canceled, it's just delayed. So I'm raising the question once again. I find it concerning. These people have to be able to move forward, and we need to have a certain number of TRs to replace those who are retiring. There are people who are leaving the profession, and we need to ensure long-term longevity of the profession. I'm scared that we'll end up in a parliament where the level of interpretation is the same as what they heard at the Nuclear Safety Commission. And if that is tolerated in departments, agencies, and the CRTC, as we heard, then that means that it's headed our way. So that's it for that issue. Now for the refusals. So we got the response, and I was a little bit surprised. I thought there were more refusals. 46 events were refused over 8,000 events at the House. So 46 out of 853 is a 5.4 rate of refusal. So that's reassuring. Once again, I am glad that we have this information, that it's transparent, but it does raise the following question. How many events within the ones that were accepted were performed by non-accredited interpreters, such as what we heard at the Nuclear Safety Commission? So maybe it would be good to get to that information. Now, I'm not accusing anyone here, but it is a concern, of course. So that concludes my comments about interpretation. In finishing, I'd like to thank everyone who collaborated with me. Thank you to the Minister, thank you to Mr. Limburner, and to the members of AIC and CAPE. We work in collaboration, and we must continue to do so to protect official languages in Parliament. So that's it. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And then I have another issue to raise for a further meeting. I just wanted to say that creating a committee to ensure better collaboration and to deal with problems or unacceptable situations, that's a real step in the right direction. So I congratulate you for your initiative. We have to make sure that the committee does function well, that it's efficient. I think that you suggested a constructive solution or a beginning of a solution for a long-standing problem. Thank you. I also have a follow-up on a question about the use of House funds. I sent you a letter on April 29th. I received a confirmation that the letter had been received on the 30th of April, and then I got correspondence from you on May 7th and then on May 12th saying that you would do the necessary verifications and then come back with an answer. But I never got any further information. Once again, I want to say that I am not trying to drag anyone through the mud. That's not my intention here. But the information that I heard is important enough that I must insist that we do get a follow-up on the questions. I think we're ready to answer. Oh, you're ready to answer? You have information? Thank you, Mr. Perron. Following the correspondence, we did some checks, and we realized that in the advertising budget there was a slight overspend of $18, and so the reimbursement was done by credits. The maximum amount for tickets was $154. Some tickets were refunded at the rate of $160, so the $6 refund was done. You mentioned one MP office in particular, too, and so there were follow-ups that were done to make sure that the staff at that office was following the rules, and the answers that we received confirmed that all of this spending was happening in the context of parliamentary activity. Okay, thank you. So you did these checks at the member's office, but did you check what the use by employees was? Because this had to do with a very major event which seemed very partisan. Now, I'm always trying to be careful with judging things before we know all the facts. There could be all sorts of things. We performed checks and we received assurances. It's not common practice to do external investigations and force people to share information with us. The starting point is always speaking to members, and if ever something seemed fishy, something seemed to contravene the boys' policies, then we could do further checks. Okay? Thank you for that information. Is it possible to get an answer in writing? Because I had sent the questions in writing. Could you submit an answer in writing at the next boy meeting, perhaps? Thank you. Thank you. That's it for my follow-ups from the last meetings.
Business from previous meetings? No. Okay. Number 3, LTVP Working Group update. I would invite Mr. Kimmich, Chair of the Working Group on the LTVP and the Centre Block Rehabilitation, Mr. Dicker, Chief Information Officer, and Ms. Jennifer Garrett, Assistant Deputy Minister from Public Services and Procurement Canada, to come to the front.
Mr. Speaker, if I could indulge you and the rest of the boy, would it be okay to switch with my presentation with the JIC, because Madame Mendez is due to switch with the other chair occupant, and there are three of us in this room.
There's no objection. Which one was that? The number...
Number 7.
Number 7? Okay, so 6. We'll do 6 now. Yeah, okay. Ms. Mendez, the floor is yours. Are you presenting?
Yes, I am presenting.
Okay, floor is yours. Yeah.
Oh my, thank you. Good morning, bonjour tout le monde. Thank you very much for welcoming us and for agreeing to change your agenda. Je suis ici en tant que présidente de la section canadienne de l'association.
I'm here as a chair of the Canadian section of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association to get your approval so that the Parliament of Canada can welcome the 70th Parliamentary Conference, or CPC, in Ottawa in September 2027. Our section was contacted by the Secretary General of the CPA in February to talk about the possibility of Canada hosting the conference next year. The CPA is the CPC is the annual conference of the CPA. It is the biggest annual gathering of Commonwealth parliamentarians. It lasts 1 week and includes several conferences, meetings, and events. There are several annual general assemblies and a plenary session as well.
Doesn't make much sense, but it's okay. De 600 à 700 personnes de tout le Commonwealth représentent
600 to 700 people from all of the Commonwealth represent around 56 countries and 180 legislative assemblies.
I initiated informal discussions with the Association's Executive Committee regarding the possibility of hosting the CPC in 2027 and received positive feedback. On April 21st, the Executive Committee agreed to a motion to ask the International and Interparliamentary Affairs Directorate to prepare a draft budget for its consideration. On May 6th, the Executive Committee reviewed the draft budget and agreed to submit it to the Joint Interparliamentary Council, where it was approved on June 2nd. The total amount being sought to host the conference is approximately $1.8 million, spread out over 2 years and to be shared by the Senate and House of Commons according to the usual 30-70 formula. Le Canada a accueilli pour la dernière fois la CPC.
Canada hosted the CPC in Halifax in 2022. Since that year, the conference was held twice in the African region, Ghana and South Africa, and it's in the Australian region and the Caribbean. The members should also note that before hosting the event in Halifax in 2022, Canada had not hosted the conference since 2004. So it is not unreasonable for the CPA to host the CPC once again in 2027. I would like to mention that the financing model proposed this year is different from the one in 2022. That is because the timeline is shorter and it is necessary to obtain authorizations from each jurisdiction, and the fact that 4 of the jurisdictions will be having elections in the fall.
Canada is well positioned to host next year's conference. First, there is a relatively small number of jurisdictions in the CPA that have the capacity to host such a large event, both in terms of the facilities required to accommodate such a large gathering and also the resources available to organize and execute a conference of this scale. 2, several potential jurisdictions that might otherwise have been able to accommodate the conference in 2027 are heading into elections themselves and are therefore not in a position to undertake the necessary planning. Lastly, there are geopolitical considerations that make Canada an ideal location for next year's conference, given our strong ties across the Commonwealth. Moreover, I would like to highlight the fact that significant efforts have been made to reduce costs in the budget. It is expected that there will be significant cost savings if the conference is held in Ottawa prior to the return of Parliament in September 2027, as we will be able to draw upon some of the parliamentary resources available. This conference is an opportunity for Canada to once again demonstrate its leadership within the Commonwealth. Such a large gathering of Commonwealth parliamentarians is also an excellent occasion to further strengthen key international relationships that are based on shared values such as human rights, sustainable development, and support for democracy. In today's ever-changing world, the conference also presents an opportunity to broaden our economic partnerships. En même temps, cela nous permettra de mettre en valeur notre beau pays et plus précisément la...
It would also allow us to showcase our beautiful country and especially our beautiful region of the National Capital Region. So we ask you to approve our proposal to host the 70th conference in Ottawa in September 2027. For your information, the Internal Economy, Budgets and Administration Committee of the Senate approved our request earlier today. Since adjournment for the summer is coming up, it is important that we receive all the approvals so that we can move forward with planning. This would include finding a location, negotiating contracts with hotels, and many other logistical issues.
Mr. Perron, Mr. Scheer.
Oui. Alors, bonjour, Mme Mendez. Ça fait plaisir de vous recevoir.
Hello, Ms. Mendez. It's a pleasure to see you here in a different context. So you know that the Commonwealth isn't really part of the bloc's DNA, but we do understand the process. I think Marianne Gaudreault is an excellent representative. Well, we do understand the importance of international cooperation. I have a question. You talk about a total cost of $1.8 million, but unless I missed it, you didn't consider the fact that if Canada does not host the conference, then Canada will send a delegation to the conference, which will have a cost associated with it, of course. So have you calculated the difference in cost? Well, it would cost much less than $1.8 million to send a delegation. Yes, but it would reduce the total bill, wouldn't it? If I may. It depends where the conference takes place. It can cost between $50,000 and $100,000 to send a delegation. All right, so it would cut down on the total bill. I have no objection there. Thank you.
I'm sorry if I missed a deeper explanation in your presentation, but am I understanding right that the decision was made not to ask provincial associations to kick in?
Because 4 will be in elections next year.
Right. Was the ask ever made? Because, you know, they can always say no, but if we don't ask, they'll never say yes. So.
Agreed, but we have our Canadian conference is coming up in July. So we'd have to pass through that executive committee first and then each jurisdiction after, and then that would limit the time that our staff would be able to prepare for the conference. And we know for a fact that the 4 jurisdictions that are having elections are going to say no.
Well, it might be, do you have to wait for them to have
An
a
executive
gathering?
meeting, yes. We have to have an executive meeting of the Canadian region.
But couldn't each provincial association make their own
I don't know.
decision
Can
if
ask
we?
before?
It's true that the Canada region typically meets during the regional conference of the summer. We could call for an extraordinary meeting, but the timelines for the approval in each of the 13 provincial and territorial legislatures would probably spell out. There are a number of those legislatures that aren't meeting anymore. Some are heading into elections. Some have elections in 2027. And I think it was felt unlikely that we'd be able to secure the necessary agreement in the shortened time frame that we have.
For the sake of a stamp for times 13, we might find.
If I may, nothing stops us from talking about it coming this July when we go to the Canadian conference and putting it to the executive committee. If they want to join in, we'll be very happy to have them. But we would need to start organizing right now. Getting the convention center itself is going to be a challenge to make sure that we have it those dates and the hotels and all of that. That's why we were a bit pressed for time in terms of moving on.
One other point, I do understand that not every member of the Commonwealth has the capacity to host an event like this. My understanding is that there are certain members of the Commonwealth that understand that they would host more often than some of the other countries, but it does seem like we hosted one in 2004, and then the next one was 2022, and now just 5 years later we're hosting another one. So I would just maybe flag and put it on that we would expect some break in time between this one and a subsequent one.
If I may, Mr. Chair, there are 9 regions in the Commonwealth. So when Canada took a break for 18 years and we didn't host any conferences because we refused the terms of the organization then. I mean, the expenses were way too big, and they expected all the organizers to pay for lodgings, and so we decided, no, Canada is getting out. So for 18 years, we refused to hold a conference until the modalities changed. When we organized in 2022, it was actually meant to be in 2020, but because of the pandemic, then we had to change the dates, and it ended up being in 2022. But we did spend, I'd say, we did skip 2 cycles where it would have been us to host it. And now, because of also the reality of elections in the other jurisdictions that would have the capacity, mostly in Asia, we would say, we were approached by the Secretary General because we seemed to be the only one that could have possibly hosted this at that time.
Any other questions and comments? So we're being asked if we will approve this 1.8 million. Is there an issue? Do we have to discuss where it's going to come from?
I think it's in the note.
Can I just ask one more question I forgot to ask in my notes? Is that okay? Okay. I think I see in your note that delegates will assume the cost of their air travel and accommodation, but the budget that is before us includes over $1 million for transportation and accommodation. Was that
let Jeremy explain that one.
Indeed. And I think it's somewhat mislabeled in the note that you have. That 1.1 million is the cost of the facilities, the cost of the AV, IT, the cost of rentals of things that we require for the conference. There's a small amount for accommodation because among the modalities for hosting a CPC, the host branch pays for members of the executive committee. That's something that is part of the deal when you host a conference, and Canada's fees are paid when Canadian executive members go abroad. But the bulk of that money is really having to do with the facilities for the conference itself, and it's not for, so ground transportation would be included in that, so shuttles back and forth from the airport and that sort of thing. But the bulk of the money is really the venue and the AVIT.
So the question is, do we approve it under the proviso that an effort will be made to find the funds internally? And for what cannot be found internally, correct me if I'm wrong, there would be, we would request supplementary funds in the supplementary estimates. So there will be an effort to find the money internally, and what can't be found would be included in a submission for supplementary funds to the House. So I'm not seeing really any objections to going forward with this. So yes, we're pleased to
Thank you very
provide
much.
that approval.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Merci
very
beaucoup
much.
de votre appui. Merci. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your support.
So we'll go back to number 3, LTVP Working Group update with Mr. Kimmich, Mr. Decaire, Ms. Garrett.
May I begin, Speaker? As chair of the LTVP working group, I'm here to provide an update to the board on the progress of the Center Block Rehabilitation Program and related long-term vision and plan projects. The working group is seeking the board's endorsement on several items. The working group recommends that the board, 1, endorse the revised swing space strategy, including the temporary allocation of 15 parliamentary office units in East Block and 19 parliamentary office units in Block 2 East Tower to accommodate members of parliament displaced during the rehabilitation of the Confederation Building. And 2, endorse the parliamentary parking mitigation strategy, which will be discussed in greater detail in camera. Nous tenons à rappeler aux membres qu'en octobre 2025,
I will remind members that in October 2025, the boy approved using the East Tower for temporary lodging for 24 necessary parliamentary offices. Following that decision, senators expressed concern by long-term use of using Tower 2 in the East Block. These concerns were mentioned by the LTVP portion held in the Senate. Senator Tanis and Husakos expressed concerns. I have since discussed at length with Senator Tanis to find a solution. I congratulate him for having found a solution. Following those discussions, the temporary offices will be put elsewhere. 19 will be in the East Tower of the East Block, and 15 will be in the 3rd floor of East Block. The members of the working group supported this proposition, considering it a viable compromise to maintain all necessary offices within the parliamentary precinct and leaves everyone in sufficient proximity to Centre Blocks and West Block. We've also been advised that during renovation work, we will continue to ensure that East Block stays functional during this lengthened occupation period. We support this revised strategy for temporary office space, and we recommend approval.
parliamentary parking mitigation strategy.
Okay, we'll go into camera. Huis clos, Monsieur Kimmich.
We're no longer in camera. Mr. Kmitch, you are going to move on to point 4, funding for Parliamentary Association.
Parliamentary Council, I'm appearing today to seek on behalf of the Council the approval of the Board of Internal Economy for an increase to the Council's budget envelope for the 2026-2027 fiscal year and for subsequent fiscal years. Permettez-moi d'abord de situer brièvement le contexte.
Allow me to give a bit of context. Canada has 13 parliamentary associations that represent the Canadian Parliament on the international stage. They therefore need adequate resources that allows them to participate in key meetings, have their voices heard, and work on a parliamentary diplomacy. After the 2026-2027 budget exercise, several members of associations expressed clear concerns. They said the budgets are insufficient, that they have had to reduce the number of activities and the number of delegates.
Budget envelope set at $4.3 million has remained unchanged since 2017-2018. During this time, the contributions required to participate in multilateral forums, such as the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, have increased significantly, rising from $1.39 million to nearly $2 million. As these contributions are drawn from the Council's envelope, this increase directly reduces the funds available for association activities. It's also important to highlight the impact of cumulative inflation of approximately 24% since 2017-2018, which has significantly reduced the real value of the budget envelope. If an indexing mechanism similar to that applied to several other parliamentary budgets had been in place, the JIC envelope would now exceed $5.3 million. The gap between this amount and the current budget clearly illustrates an erosion of financial capacity and explains the pressures observed today. So on behalf of the Council, I therefore submit 2 recommendations to address these issues. First, the Council is requesting a permanent increase of $628,250, an amount that reflects the growth in international contributions since the last increase 9 years ago. Based on the established 30-70 ratio, the House of Commons' share would amount to $439,775. Second, to prevent this situation from recurring in the coming years, the Council recommends an annual adjustment to its overall budget envelope beginning in 2027-2028 based on Consumer Price Index. This would reflect the approach adopted to mitigate the impact of inflation on other parliamentary budgets. Pour votre information, le Comité permanent de la Régie interne des budgets et de l'administration du Sénat
For your information, the SIBA recently approved these recommendations, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
To Mr. Kmitch, for the benefit of perhaps those that might be watching this, can you give us some examples of or talk a little bit about the importance of this work in terms of parliamentarians fulfilling their functions and what the benefit is to Canadians by members doing this work?
So I'll just say this very broadly. Members travel in these different associations. They meet parliamentarians, elected officials from other countries. They build ties with them. They build connections with them. Some of that is useful both to the government but also to Parliament in the long term. Those relationships then serve to inform them on legislation, amendments, and ideas to put forward. I've been part of different non-parliamentary groups thanks to those connections that are built through these parliamentary associations. These bonds are important longer term as you're building legislation, and also a coalition of partners in other countries when you're trying to put forth legislative consistency across, say, our Western alliances. It does matter and it does make a difference.
D'autres commentaires? On approuve cette demande?
Other comments? Do we approve this request? Perfect. Number 5.
Des points de
Using a travel point system for travel in the United States. Mr. Kmitch. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are asking for a change to the system of travel points for travel to the U.S.
Parliamentarians play an important role in maintaining dialogue with U.S. elected officials. This work is essential to advancing Canada's interests, which is why the Council is asking you to consider the following 2 recommendations. First, to authorize the use of travel points for travel to the United States for Parliamentary Association activities, which is not currently permitted, as well as for senators' and members' parliamentary functions, including participation at regional meetings. In this regard, it should be specified that the use of travel points for association activities would only be permitted where an MP is a member of an association undertaking the travel and is part of the official delegation approved by the whips. An MP wishing to join an official delegation as an observer would be required to obtain prior approval from the executive committee of the relevant association. This approach would ensure the continued application of the principles of proportionality within official delegation. The recommendation also provides for expanding the use of travel points in relation to parliamentary functions not associated with association activities. However, it should be noted that this aspect of the recommendation does not fall within the Council's mandate. Consequently, it would be incumbent upon members of the Board of Internal Economy to examine this matter in greater detail in order to establish appropriate guidelines. La seconde recommandation serait d'élargir
The
l'utilisation.
second recommendation would be to broaden the access to travel points to certain areas in the United States where Canada has a consulate general, as well as New York and Washington, including Atlanta, Boston, Chicago, Dallas, Denver, Detroit, Los Angeles, Miami, Minneapolis, San Francisco, and Seattle. Please note that SIBA recently examined these recommendations and proposed that the administration prepare a proposal that would reflect the changes that would have to be made to senators' policies for the 2027-2028 year. I'm prepared to answer any questions you may have.
M. Kmitch, pour vos
Thank
présentations.
you, Mr. Kmitch, for your presentation. We just approved an increase to the budget for interparliamentary associations. Now we're talking about the U.S., our main trading partner. And regardless of what we do to diversify our trade relations elsewhere, the U.S. will remain our main trading partner. So just because there is a change of government, now I won't get into detail, everyone knows who I'm talking about, but that complicates things a little bit. And so the way we as parliamentarians can counter negative consequences is to have good pre-established relationships with people who live on the other side of the border. We need to be able to represent the interests of our different regions in Canada. So I think that allowing for a little more latitude in travel to our main trading partner, I don't have the exact figures, but I think it's 85% of our trade, I think makes sense, and I would be in favor. Is everyone in favor? It would seem so. Mr. Workington.
Rule states that members kind of determine what they're going to do in Washington, but I believe that New York has to be in conjunction with United Nations event. These other, what was the provisions that you were stipulating would be required for people to fly to these jurisdictions? Would it be connections with the consulate or working with the consulate, or is there, what was the specific provisions that would be required?
So if there is a consulate in those cities, members would be able to travel. Now, if there's a parliamentary association designated meeting there, they would still need to be a member of the association in order to use that point. If they wanted to join the delegation as an observer, they would still need to get WIP's approval. That there's basically conditions in there to make sure that this is not being misused.
Saying is that you could travel to any of those cities that have consulates as long as it's on association business.
That's what the JIC is asking.
That is what the JIC is asking,
Yeah,
yes. They're
that's-
just
that's-
broaden it.
Which makes sense. Are we good? Mr. Workington, yeah.
I think I misunderstood that originally. I thought that this was for connections with the consulate, but now I'm being told that this is only in the circumstances that people are attending parliamentary association functions. I'm probably confused. Or there's two things. Maybe
yeah, so just
run this through again.
I'll run it through again. So there's two different recommendations. The first one is to the United States when there's parliamentary travel with an association. So that member would have to be a member of the association undertaking the travel. They would have to still seek WIP's approval as part of the official delegation. If an MP wanted to join the official delegation as an observer, they still have to be required to get prior approval to join through the executive committee of that parliamentary association.
Excuse me, Mr. Commish, to interrupt you, but to any city in the United States, if it's with the parliament?
No, just those
Only the
ones.
ones with consulates?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And then the second recommendation would be just to broaden the number of cities in the United States that a parliamentarian from Canada could travel to those which there's the Consul General. That's correct, yes. That's why there's two recommendations. So you can pick and choose your own adventure.
But in
here or
both
with
cases,
both.
it's only to cities where we have consulates.
Yes, and you obviously would still need parliamentary activities in order to be
Yeah.
there.
Okay. Clarify, Mr. Workington?
Apparently. Very good. Thank you.
We agree with both? Okay. Thank you. We'll go to number 10, 2025-26 Annual Financial Report and request for approval of budget carry forward to 2026-27. Mr. St. Georges, Madame Côté, Ms. Wilson, and Mr. Clayton. Oh, and Ms. Grubesic. Go ahead, Mr. St. Georges, the floor is yours.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I am presenting the annual financial report of the House for the financial year that ended on March 31st, 2026. It includes audited financial reports audited by KPMG. I'm also asking the board to authorize a carry forward of operating funds. When it comes to the financial results, the budget totals $807.9 million, which includes authorized funds of $684.3 million and adjustments as well as services received for free and other adjustments that reflect standard accounting norms. On March 31st, total expenses were $782.5 million. I will now ask Mr. Clayton to present the audit findings.
And our audit opinion on the 2026 financial statements and provide a brief summary of the conduct of the audit. I'd like to introduce my colleague, Ines Grabasek, Audit Manager for the audit. The Chief Financial Officer has presented the 2026 financial statements, which management has prepared using public sector accounting standards. And these public sector accounting standards are used by all governments in Canada and are issued by the Public Sector Accounting Board. KPMG was appointed through a competitive process as the independent auditor of the House of Commons for a term beginning in 2024 and ending in the current year. Our role as your independent auditors is to obtain reasonable assurance whether these financial statements as a whole are free from material misstatement. The 2026 financial statement audit began with the development of our audit plan, which was based on multiple discussions with management. Our year-end audit was executed in accordance with that plan. During our audit, we received the full participation from your House administration. All of our questions were answered, all of the required documentation was received, and all issues were satisfactorily resolved. We have completed our audit and have issued our audit opinion on June 1st, 2026 in our independent auditor's report. The opinion states that the financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the House of Commons as at March 31st, 2026, its results of operations, accumulated surplus, and its cash flows for the year then ended in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards. This is the fourth straight year that the audited financial statements were published in early June, and I want to commend the House administration for implementing the ongoing financial reporting processes required to achieve this date. I also thank the board for scheduling this presentation prior to summer recess and a very busy legislative agenda. I will now pass back to the CFO.
Thank you, Mr. Clayton. With the board's approval, the House of Commons is also permitted to carry forward up to 5% of its voted main estimates. And for 25-26, the maximum carry forward amount is $23.4 million. While the reported year-end surplus is $25.4, the amount eligible for carry forward is capped at the 5% limit. The carry forward is first allocated to the budgets of members and House officers in accordance with the Mass, with the remaining amount allocated to the administration to support members' House operations, compliance requirements, and unfunded pressures. Some of these items include the transformation of parliamentary proceedings, committee witness experience project, the strategic internal assessment of operations, which includes the client experience and related activities, constituency office technology, and as well the accessibility plan. The administration is therefore seeking the board's approval to include in the carry forward $23.4 million in the supplementary estimates for 26-27, and this includes our presentation.
Okay. So do we agree with the carry forward? Oui, Monsieur Perron.
Juste une question complémentaire, Monsieur Scarpellegis.
Just a question, Chair. Mr. St. George, I approve, of course. Don't worry about that. When it's possible to have a carry forward of 5%, that means that there was careful management. We're in a time of financial streamlining. We are talking about some cost savings, but we do have to pay for fundamental services like interpretation. Now, obviously, we know that in departments, if budgets are not used up, sometimes they are subtracted from the continuing budgets. And so sometimes you see departments hurrying up and buying new furniture because they don't want to have less money the following year. You know what I'm talking about. So, in my opinion, I think you deserve congratulations for sound management. But given the context, the excess of the excess that you can't carry forward, where does it go? And would it not be possible to consider saving more than 5% to encourage sound financial management, maybe reduce the pressure when it comes to cuts? Thank you for your question. The answer is yes. The boy can make a request for $2 million in addition to the $23 million. The 5% comes from Treasury Board, but in addition to that, you can request $2 million for the following year. I see. I'm a little surprised by your answer. I didn't think that's what you would say. I'd like to hear what my colleagues think. Any other comments?
Bon. Semble pas avoir de réaction immédiate chez mes collègues.
My colleagues don't seem to be reacting. What they're suggesting is that I continue. They seem to be surprised by your answer, but it's interesting to know that it is possible. So that would be aside from the carryover. Perhaps you could provide a little bit more detail. So the request for the 5% plus a request for supplementary amounts that would refer to the $2 million. I'd like to understand what we're talking about. I'm a little confused.
OK, là, je comprends pourquoi. OK. Donc, c'est
Okay, now I understand. So we're talking about $2 million in surplus that we would want to keep, correct? Okay, well, I'm surprised too, Mr. Perron. But we agree. I'm looking for the right term. We agree with the carry forward. Just one last little thing to be crystal clear. I don't want to seem like the guy who wants to spend millions and line my pockets, but since I've become whip, I'm very aware of all of the efforts of sound management made by the House administration and the pressure on all the structures. And now, at the end of the year, I can see that you did a really great job because you saved more than the 5%. So my question is, where does this go? And so, Mr. Saint-Georges, say we don't keep that $2 million. Where does it go? Couldn't we keep it in a reserve fund for next year so that we can help with the budgetary streamlining? So that's all I wanted to say. Maybe we don't have time to analyze this in depth today, but the idea is that we want to be efficient and not waste public money. Because where does this money go? Does it go somewhere else and then does it get spent? Well, that's too bad because the House administration made a big effort to save that money and they don't manage to take advantage of that effort. Is it clear? Am I clear? I'm going to ask the first question. Are we approving the carryover of the 5%? Okay, and the second question, for the additional surplus, do we ask to keep that $2 million? Well, Mr. Chair, the first question, I didn't hear part of the answer. If we don't keep that additional amount, what happens to it? It returns to the Consolidated Revenue Fund. So do we just send it back to the Consolidated Revenue Fund? We didn't really talk about this. That's a common practice. That is what usually happens. But considering that the House administration team was very efficient, this might leave a bit of wiggle room next year, but I won't object. But it's something I've been wondering about for several years. You know what I'm talking about, the expenses that different departments incur at the end of the year. I can see the logic in what you're saying about the 2 million, but apparently it would be very unusual. So do we maintain the usual practice? Yes, at least for this year, and then we can look at it again next year. Perfect. I have something else to read.
Camera for a brief discussion with the external auditors on the year-end statements without the presence of House administration officials, but before doing so, as we will have new auditors next year, I would like to extend our sincere thanks to KPMG for their dedicated service and valued partnership over the years. Thank you very much. Thank you. Items.
So for number
Okay. Okay, we're back in out of camera. We'll go to number 7. Mr. Dicker. And maybe we could, to save a little time, maybe we could shorten the opening remarks and just get to the essence.
Or just go straight to the
Go straight to the essence. Okay, Mr. Garrettson? Oh, I thought okay, so Mr. Garrettson. Go
Well,
ahead.
I did review this, and I'll say that, I'm very interested in this because I think it's necessary. I understand that as part of the new systems that we will integrate when we move into center block will be, we're extending basically what is the function of the bells to also be on mobile devices, which I think is very important given the fact that when the bells were originally established, it was centuries ago, and people operated and worked differently, and the fact that the work environments are changing, I applaud you guys for looking for ways to advance the notification system for votes. So you have the two recommendations, option 1 and option 2. Option 1 being to online SMS texting when a vote occurs, and then you have option 2, which is the new mobile application. I understand the timelines that are involved in those. So my recommendation would be that we advance, as much as you can, bring on the new application on devices, because it will be implemented eventually anyways. But in the interim, to add on as another channel of delivery. So right now we have the bells, we have the emails, and Wicker. Another channel of delivery would be SMS texting to numbers that are provided to the House for that. So that's what I would, how I would recommend that we proceed.
And then keep working on an app?
And then keep working on that, in the timelines that can permit that to occur.
Monsieur Perron.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président. Moi,
Thank you, Chair. I have no objection to working on improving the application because I imagine it will replace Wicker. But I'm a little worried because our devices are more and more secured. Sometimes it's very complicated to connect. It's very repetitive. If we start getting into text messages, based on my understanding, that solution had security issues. So do we really need to move to text messages while the House is working on an app that would replace Wicker? So that's my question. We have several tools at our disposal. Wicker, the bells, our teams in the antechamber. So I'm just asking the question. Mr. Dicker. Mr. Perron, it's an excellent question. And it is up to the boy to decide on which channel to implement. In general, SMS text messages are not secure. And that is why if we did choose text messages, we'd have to add additional protections. But it's up to the committee to choose if you want option 1, option 2, or a combination. So, question before us. Mr. Garrettson.
The text messaging is completely separate from the voting application, correct? So all it's doing is notifying people of a vote. So it's no different than if you're seeing the light go off or if you're seeing the countdown on CPAC. It doesn't matter who receives that in theory because it's just a notification. So it's not connected to the systems of our voting, correct?
That is correct, sir.
Yeah. So I think
je comprends ça, Marc, mais mettons, qu'est-ce que ça change?
Mark, I understand that, but what is the added benefit compared to Wicker? I already have one. We have an internal system as well. I have the bell, I have the email. I understand, but if you're working on an application that is maybe more efficient, then, well, there's going to be another project. It's going to cost money. There will be security issues.
What but I think the added benefit is that that Wicker is unique to the members only. Text messages can be more broadly distributed so staff can receive those as well. Anybody could, in theory, receive those because it's just a simple text message that says a vote is happening now. So I see it completely different than Wicker because Wicker I look at as something that is very secure for members only, whereas a text message is similar to the bells going off or the or CPAC saying a vote is happening now. And I think that the benefit to that is that then there will be more staff that are receiving the notifications. And I think that it's important to appreciate the fact that quite often, because when votes are happening without any anticipation of them sometimes, that members become aware of them. 100 years ago, when we started using this bell system, people were always around here. They're always on the hill. They were in their offices. They were always somewhere where they would see that bell start flashing. The reality is that the way that the system works now is that people don't necessarily have to be here. So I think that it's incumbent upon us to ensure that we look for new ways to promote the fact that a vote is happening so that people become notified of it. So if that means making sure that all staff members also become aware of it, I actually look at it as a more secure way of keeping staff away from the security stuff, which is Wicker.
Au niveau sécuritaire de reporter les élections, peut-être, je sais pas.
When it comes to security, it might help win elections, sure. I don't have a problem, but I mean, if it works well, then we may not need to create a new application. So I'm suggesting that we go step by step. We could try that. We can definitely go step by step. We can start with the text message. And then if we want to move on to an application.
Talk about the application later.
Okay. Agreed? Agreed. Okay, two other items that shouldn't take a lot of time, 8 and 9. The approval of the annual 2025-2026 annual report on committee activities and the report to Canadians 2026. We're good?
Juste une chose que je voulais souligner, Monsieur le Président, puis je
I
sais
just
que
wanted to say one thing, Mr. Chair. When we look at the report that we're going to share with Canadians at large, I think it's important to say that we inform people about the composition of standing committees at the House of Commons, and the information we're sending out is wrong. It's no longer accurate. When I asked the question informally, I was told, well, it's an annual report based on the information on March 31st, and it was decided unilaterally by the party in power to change the composition of the committees without consulting members of the bloc. So basically, we're sharing information with Canadians that is not up to date. It bothered me, and I was told, well, it was based on March 31st, and next year will reflect what's happening now. Fine. Well, I think we should add an annex that says that the composition of committees was changed. I think it's important because otherwise we're going to leave the public with an erroneous impression for 1 year. So maybe a footnote saying that there was a modification when it comes to the composition of committees. Yes, well, if my colleagues agree, right? We don't have to mention every single change. Mark won't agree with saying that there was a unilateral change. Okay, we can add a footnote saying that the current composition is different. So we approve both reports, but before we leave, I want to give the floor to Mr. Bédard.
Just to clarify the decision of the boy, Travel points are dealt with in the members' bylaws, so that will require an amendment. We will bring the bylaw amendments for pro forma approval at the next meeting. Now, right now, the current regime is that there are 4 points that can be used for Washington, and members can use 2 of those points for New York, provided that it's for United Nations activities. I would like some clarification on the Boyd decision. Do you want those 4 points to be used everywhere there's a consulate, or just use the 2 points from New York for cities where there are a consulate? Just to clarify that decision.
Monsieur Perron?
Go ahead.
What Mr. Kimich was asking for was the first thing you said, correct?
My understanding is that the decision was very broad, but I just wanted to confirm from Boyd, because I don't think there was any, the number of points were discussed. So if the decision is on the 4 points.
Yeah, I think that's what they were asking for.
Moi, ce que j'ai compris, Monsieur le Président, ce que j'ai compris...
Mr. Chair, what I understood is that we were opening things up more broadly, that points could be used either for regional assemblies or committee activity. There has to be a reason, and I understood it has to go through, it has to get WIP's approval, so there's a certain control there. But there's no consulate in Washington. Washington is already covered by the regulation. The 4 points can be used to go to Washington. I see. Is there a limit to the number of points that can be used to go to cities where there's a consulate? Well, that's my question. I see. Mr. Chair, what I understood from Mr. Kmich's presentation was that the limit is that there has to be a relevant event. It has to be a visit that is done in the context of an association meeting. Is that what you understood, Mr. Bidard? If I understood correctly, this had to do with the 4 points. The first issue, the first case where the points could be used was for association business, and then there was another potential use that parliamentarians could use the points to visit a city where there's a Canadian consulate. So what I wanted to clarify with the boy is, did this apply to the 2 points or the 4 points? I understood that it was for the 4 points, but maybe I misunderstood.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I understood it, but I would propose that it be eligible for the 2 points. So there'd be 4 eligible to go to Washington, but then 2 could be extended for the possibility of New York or the new list of cities. Let's see how that works, and then we'll go from there.
Vous êtes d'accord? Parfait. OK.
L'idée, c'est de garder le maximum de 4, là, je pense.
You agree? The idea is to keep a maximum of 4 and then have a bit of flexibility. Okay. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.